response to recent attacks. This is only one example of the risk of continued escalations of attacks against seagoing merchant vessels and the impact on global supply chain, particularly increasing freight costs and lengthening delivery times. We continue to share the concerns of the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization with respect to the need for the protection of the freedom of maritime navigation, and also about the potential impact of current attacks and disruptions to sea traffic in the Red Sea and environs on international trade. We reaffirm the importance of ensuring safety and security of maritime navigation in the region. In that regard, we also call for the immediate release of the Galaxy leader and her crew, which was seized by the Houthis on 19th of November. We reiterate that such incidents originating from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen must stop. No cause or grievance can justify continuation of these attacks against the freedom of navigation. As to the overall situation in the region, we encourage all concerned parties to avoid further escalation and de-escalate tensions and threats. This is critical so that traffic through the Red Sea can return to its normal state and the risk of Yemen being dragged into regional conflagration be avoided. The continued assistance of this Council in actively engaging with all concerned parties who may be able to push for restraint remains extremely valuable, so that through our combined efforts, we can prevent further escalation in the Red Sea from exacerbating regional tensions or undermining regional peace, security, or international trade. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Je remercie Monsieur Chiari de son exposé et je donne à présent la parole à Monsieur Arsenio Dominguez. Vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. President, and distinguished members of the Security Council. Firstly, let me start by reiterating my condemnation on the attacks against international shipping in the Red Sea area and reiterate the strong commitment of the International Maritime Organization to protect seafarers, ships, and cargoes, which is the utmost importance to ensure the safety and security of global supply chains. Attacks against international shipping in the Red Sea area are not acceptable. Ships must be allowed to trade worldwide unhindered and in accordance with international law. Since the beginning of November, a number of attacks have been launched against international vessels operating and navigating in this vital shipping lane that records around 15% of international trade. The initial targets were ships linked to Israel, but the information that we have received in recent events seems that this is not to be the case at the moment. The International Maritime Organization continues to closely monitor the situation and liaise with the industry representatives and navies. A significant number of companies, around 18 of shipping companies, have already decided to reroute their vessels around South Africa in order to reduce the attacks on vessels and, of course, the impact that it has on seafarers in particular. This represents an additional 10 days to the journeys and, of course, has also a negative impact on trade and an increase on freight rates. On Monday, the 18th of December, an extraordinary meeting of the members of the Djibouti Code of Conduct was held to discuss how to deal with increasing threats against international shipping in the Red Sea area. This meeting was attended by the representatives of the signatory states of the Djibouti Code of Conduct and its Jeddah amendments, international and regional naval forces, regional centers, and maritime industry stakeholders. The meeting called for the enhanced security measures, including coordination among signatory states, navies, and the industry, and continuous meetings and reviews and submissions to the recommendations to the International Maritime Organization and the United Nations Security Council. IMO has an EU-funded regional program for maritime security in the Red Sea area, and we use this as a major capacity building program targeting the southern Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. And through this initiative, together with Interpol and UNODC, as well as the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, we continue to engage in coordinating actions to develop capacities and promote the adequate security and safety standards for maritime, port, and land-based law enforcement authorities across Djibouti, Ethiopia, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. I would like to take this opportunity to reiterate the call for the de-escalation to ensure safety of our seafarers, freedom of navigation, and stability of supply chains. The International Maritime Organization will continue to monitor the situation in collaboration with our member states, partners from the industry, and navies. I would like to express appreciation also for the work undertaken by the Djibouti Code of Conduct's member states and encourage other member states to use it as a forum to ensure communication among all countries in the region. Furthermore, and as a practical exercise in following routes, measures of navigation, safety of navigations, I would like to encourage ships to continue sending an initial report when entering the voluntary reporting area to the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Center and other relevant centers in the region, as this covers the entire Red Sea, and ships should send an initial report when clearing Suez or when crossing boundaries in the Indian Ocean to enhance the safety of navigations for all the vessels in the region. Thank you again for this opportunity, Mr. President.
Je remercie M. Dominguez de son exposé. Je donne à présent la parole aux membres du Conseil qui souhaitent faire une déclaration, en commençant par le représentant des États-Unis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chiari, Mr. Dominguez, thank you for your insights on the grave threats posed by the continuing Houthi attacks against commercial and merchant vessels in the Red Sea. Just over 1 month ago, the Security Council warned the Houthis to stop these attacks. Instead, the Houthis continue to strike commercial vessels transiting through the Red Sea's vital shipping lane, with growing consequences for freedom of navigation, regional peace and security, and global commerce. Since November 19, there have been over 20 attacks by the Houthis. On December 31st, the Houthis attempted to board the Maersk Hangzhou, a container ship registered to Singapore and operated by a Danish firm. Maersk had only resumed using the route a few days earlier after the United States, its allies, and its partners launched a multinational naval operation to protect ships in the southern part of the Red Sea and deter against lawless non-state actors. U.S. Navy personnel who had come to the aid of the Maersk Hangzhou issued verbal warnings to the Houthi attackers. But rather than cease their attacks, the Houthis responded by opening fire. 3 Houthi boats were subsequently sunk in the act of self-defense. Additionally, 2 anti-ship missiles were fired from Houthi-controlled areas at U.S. Navy vessels that had responded to the Maersk Hangzhou's distress call. These unacceptable attacks, these clear violations of international law, continue. In fact, just this morning, the Houthis announced that they have targeted another container ship. Colleagues, during the Council's meeting just over 2 weeks ago, many delegations expressed a view that the Council has a responsibility to help ensure that the free flow of lawful transit through the Red Sea continues unimpeded. Today, in light of both the broad support for council action and continued Houthi attacks, the United States believes that we are at an inflection point. These attacks pose grave implications for maritime security, international shipping, and commerce, and they undermine the fragile humanitarian situation in Yemen, damaging the ability of the international community to deliver assistance to more than 21 million people in need. It is vital that the Council speak, and speak now, on the need to uphold international law as well as navigational rights and freedoms. Even as we continue to demand that the Houthis stop these attacks, which are clear violations of international law, we must not overlook the root of the problem. Iran has long enabled these attacks by the Houthis. Beyond Iran's longstanding provision of financing to aid such Houthi operations, since 2015, it has transferred advanced weapon systems to the Houthis, including unmanned aerial systems, land attack cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles used in attacks against maritime vessels. Consistent with this long-term support and encouragement of the Houthis' destabilizing actions in the region, we also know that Iran has been deeply involved in planning operations against commercial vessels in the Red Sea. The United States does not seek confrontation with Iran. Iran has a choice here. It can continue its current course, or it can withhold its support, without which the Houthis would struggle to effectively track and strike commercial vessels navigating shipping lanes through the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. Let's remember that the provision of arms and related materiel of all types to the Houthis is a violation of this Council's Resolution 2216. All member states should adhere to their obligations under this resolution. Colleagues, the threat to navigational rights and freedoms in the Red Sea is a global challenge and necessitates a global response. Let us remember our responsibilities as members of the Security Council to address these challenges. We look forward to engaging constructively with other members of the Council toward that end. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant des États-Unis de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de l'Équateur.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Inicio mi intervención felicitando a su delegación por asumir la presidencia de este Consejo y asegurarle nuestro apoyo en el cumplimiento de esta tarea. Deseo también dar la bienvenida a nuestros colegas de Argelia, Eslovenia, Guyana, República de Corea y Sierra Leona, con quienes estoy seguro mantendremos una cooperación constructiva en el transcurso de este año. Tomamos nota y agradecemos la información proporcionada por el subsecretario Khaled Chiari, así como por el secretario general de la Organización Marítima Internacional, Arsenio Domínguez. Ecuador ha seguido con preocupación las graves consecuencias políticas, humanitarias y económicas que supone la amenaza de las milicias hutíes de Yemen para la navegación marítima en el Mar Rojo. En este contexto, en mi intervención me centraré en tres ámbitos. En primer lugar, deseo reiterar la condena de mi país a los ataques terroristas perpetrados por diversas embarcaciones comerciales en el Mar Rojo por parte de los hutíes. Estas se han intensificado en estas últimas semanas y constituyen una flagrante violación del derecho internacional y, por lo tanto, una amenaza a la paz y a la seguridad internacionales. Hacemos un llamado a la liberación inmediata del Galaxy y a sus tripulantes. Ecuador subraya la importancia de garantizar el pleno respeto al derecho internacional en relación con la navegación marítima. Asimismo, recordamos las disposiciones de la Convención de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Derecho del Mar que regulan los actos de la piratería. En segundo lugar, compartimos lo expresado por el subsecretario general Khaled Chiari en su intervención ante el Consejo el 29 de diciembre pasado sobre el riesgo de que esta situación exacerbe aún más las tensiones en la región. Debido a las ramificaciones que tienen los conflictos en Medio Oriente, así como por el involucramiento de diversos actores, es preciso evitar situaciones que incrementen el riesgo de su propagación. Lo contrario tendrá efectos devastadores para toda la región y podría desestabilizar la paz y la seguridad internacional. En tercer lugar, los ataques sufridos por embarcaciones comerciales han bloqueado el tráfico marítimo a través del Canal de Suez, un corredor crítico para el comercio mundial bienes de consumo y el suministro de energía que une Europa con Asia y por el que se transporta alrededor del 12% del comercio mundial. La imposibilidad de navegar por el Mar Rojo agrava la inseguridad alimentaria y la crisis humanitaria en Yemen y tiene impactos a escala global por sus efectos negativos en las cadenas de suministro regionales e internacionales. En efecto, ante las amenazas contra su seguridad, las compañías navieras han cambiado de ruta y desviado sus embarcaciones a través del Cabo de Buena Esperanza, lo que se prevé provocará retrasos y aumento de los precios de los bienes. Para finalizar, Ecuador reafirma que el diálogo político intrayemení, bajo los auspicios de las Naciones Unidas, es el único camino hacia la paz sostenible en ese país, al tiempo que expresa su respaldo a las acciones que, en apego al derecho internacional, se adopten para asegurar el tránsito marítimo de embarcaciones por el Mar Rojo y evitar mayores distorsiones en el comercio mundial. Gracias, presidente.
Je remercie le représentant de l'Équateur de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de la Slovénie.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and congratulations on assuming the presidency for the month of January. You can rest assured that you have our full support for your work. We are very pleased that as a new elected member, we are taking our seat at the Security Council today. I also want to thank our briefers, Assistant Secretary Chiari and Secretary General of IMO Dominguez, for their timely updates on the very concerning developments in the Red Sea. The deteriorating situation in the Red Sea is indeed deeply concerning, and the escalation witnessed in recent days is particularly worrying. The Houthis' interference with navigational rights and freedoms over the past weeks is simply unacceptable and poses a serious threat to international maritime security. It also poses a significant threat to the movement of food, fuel, and critical humanitarian assistance intended to reach populations across the world. So we condemn these attacks and call for their immediate cessation. We furthermore call for the release of the Galaxy leader and its crew seized in November. We also wish to acknowledge the contribution of many member states to efforts towards ensuring freedom of navigation and reinforcing regional maritime security in line with international law at this sensitive time. President, we are all acutely aware of the last months of 2023 have proved to be an extremely turbulent months for the region of the Middle East. So the need to avoid regional spillover and escalation from the current devastation in Gaza, Israel, and the broader region is paramount. So we therefore call once again for the cessation of all attacks against commercial vessels operating in the region's crucial waterways, for utmost restraint from all actors, and for a calming of the situation. It should be in no one's interest to see a further destabilization and spiral of violence in the region, not the people of Gaza, not the people of Israel, and not the people of Yemen. Thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de la Slovénie de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant du Japon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since this is the first Security Council meeting in this month, I'd like to also join congratulating your assumption of the presidency. And I also would like to welcome new non-permanent members of the Council, Algeria, Guyana, Republic of Korea, Sierra Leone, and Slovenia. I look forward to working with you very closely. On today's issue, first I'd like to express my appreciation ASG Chiari and Mr. Dominguez of IMO for their comprehensive briefing on the critical issue. Nearly 3 months have passed since the devastating conflict in Gaza began. Now, as we had feared, the conflict is spilling over into the wider region. In particular, Japan has grave concerns about the increasingly volatile situation in the Red Sea. Almost weekly or even more frequently, and as recently as yesterday, Houthi militants have attacking commercial vessels with missiles and drones, and today we have heard also news report in addition. And they have signaled that they will not stop these hostile activities. Japan is outraged by the armed seizure and continued holding of the Japanese-operated vessel Galaxy Leader and its 25-person Maritime national crew since November 19th of the last year. It is unacceptable that the innocent crew has been detained for more than 40 days. We see no reason to tolerate such an injustice and strongly demand the release of Galaxy Leader and its crew immediately and unconditionally. The Houthis claim they are acting in solidarity with the Palestinians in their fight against Israel, but there is no justification to attack commercial vessels engaged in lawful transit through the Red Sea. Mr. President, the Red Sea is a critical sea lane for global maritime transportation. The Houthi threats to maritime security and freedom of navigation in this important waterway have already disrupted international trade. Indeed, major international shipping companies, including Japanese ones, have been forced to pause their operations or take the more costly, energy-intensive, and time-consuming route around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa for their travel between Asia and Europe. This would cause a significant negative impact on supply chains and the global economy. With all of this in mind, Japan unequivocally condemned the Houthis' reckless conduct and calls for the Houthis and other regional stakeholders not to engage in further destabilization actions in Red Sea and the broader region. It is now time to think about the next steps. 1 month ago, the Security Council issued a press release on the maritime threats posed by Houthis. This reaction was timely given the surge of alarming incidents. However, regrettably, there has been no sign of these attacks abating, and instead, Houthis are even escalating their activities. The Security Council should not let this continue. In this regard, and in view of urgency and importance of the matter, Japan believes the Security Council should take an appropriate action to deter additional threats by the Houthis and maintain international peace and security. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant du Japon de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole à la représentante de Malte.
Thank you, President, and I also thank Assistant Secretary General Chiari and Secretary General Dominguez for their briefing. As this is the first formal meeting of the year, let me take this opportunity to welcome our new Council members, Algeria, Guyana, Republic of Korea, Sierra Leone, and Slovenia, and bid farewell and thanks to our colleagues from Albania, Brazil, Gabon, Ghana, and the UAE, whose terms finished at the end of December. We also congratulate Ecuador for their successful presidency last month and France on assuming the Council presidency for the month of January. President, Malta is gravely concerned by the deteriorating maritime security situation in the Red Sea. Over recent weeks, we have seen a worrying escalation in attacks against commercial shipping in the area. Such attacks are in violation of international law and reflected in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. They are unacceptable and must be condemned in the strongest possible terms. This is why we have joined other Council members in calling for this meeting today. We call on the Houthis to immediately cease such attacks and actions against commercial shipping and to abide by their obligations under international law. For over 6 weeks, the Galaxy Leader vessel and its 25-person crew have been held illegally by the Houthis. This is unacceptable. We reiterate our call for their immediate and unconditional release. We have seen great strides towards peace in Yemen over the past 18 months. Parties to the conflict must not allow tensions in the region to threaten these efforts. These maritime attacks undermine the current peace talks and the work of the UN Special Envoy. Maritime security is of critical importance for the well-being of Yemen's civilian population, who heavily rely on imports for essential needs. Imports of humanitarian aid are vulnerable to external shocks and global dynamics, jeopardizing humanitarian assistance to the 21 million Yemenis in need. This includes the import of food to the 17 million Yemenis who are food insecure. Houthi attacks against merchant shipping threaten the flow of aid to Yemen. This could have devastating consequences for the population, aggravating the already dire humanitarian situation in the country. Parties to the conflict, notably the Houthis, must remain focused, establishing a formal ceasefire leading to an inclusive Yemeni-led and owned political process under UN auspices. We call on all concerned parties to exercise maximum restraint and refrain from taking any additional escalatory actions that could further jeopardize the hard-won gains made towards peace in Yemen and have a destabilizing effect on the region. To conclude, President, the navigational rights and freedoms of commercial vessels in the Red Sea and the Bab al-Mandab is of paramount importance. These rights must be respected and assured. Further escalation in this artery of global trade can have far-reaching consequences. They will jeopardize the lives of the millions of Yemenis who rely on humanitarian assistance. The Houthis have a responsibility to the people of Yemen and must act in their best interest. The Yemeni people deserve lasting peace. They have waited long enough. Thank you.
Je remercie la représentante de Malte de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de la République de Corée.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by congratulating your assumption of the presidency. As one of the new council members, we will actively engage and contribute to the various discussions of the council. I would also like to thank ASU Mr. Chiari and IMO Secretary General Mr. Dominguez for their briefings on the Red Sea. The current situation in the Middle East stands at an imminent threat of escalation. The perilous situation in Gaza is triggering fears of a serious spillover and the deterioration of other parts of the region. Thus, it is urgent to exert every effort to decrease the tensions in the region, including the Red Sea. We are particularly worried about the reckless and illegal attacks by the Houthis against commercial vessels on the Red Sea. The Republic of Korea calls for the immediate release of the Galaxy Leader, which has been seized since the 19th of November, and its 25 crew members. To our dismay, a series of attacks against commercial vessels are ongoing in the Red Sea. We are deeply concerned by the attack last weekend against the Singapore-flagged and Denmark-owned container ship Maersk Hangzhou, as well as the reports of the firing of 2 anti-ship ballistic missiles into the Red Sea just yesterday. Mr. President, the Red Sea is a crucial waterway for international trade and commerce. Any threat or hindrance to freedom of navigation recognized under international law is both unacceptable and unjustifiable. In the same vein, this Council adopted Resolution 1838 on Somalia to protect the safety of commercial maritime routes heading to the Red Sea. And the Republic of Korea has actively participated in the international effort to fight against piracy off the coast of Somalia by dispatching in 2009 the ROK Navy Somali Sea Escort Task Group, or Cheonghae Budae. The Republic of Korea strongly calls for the cessation of all provocations and endanger not only the freedom of navigation and the lawful traffic, but regional peace and security in the broader sense as well. We support the efforts of relevant countries to protect commercial vessels on the Red Sea and also support members' call for Security Council action on this matter in a timely manner. Mr. President, last month we encountered some relieving news from the Office of the Special Envoy of the Secretary General for Yemen, reporting that the parties in Yemen had committed to a set of measures to implement a nationwide ceasefire and to engage in preparations for the resumption of an inclusive political process under the UN auspices. The Republic of Korea fully supports a Yemeni-led political transition process alongside the active role of the UN, including the Special Envoy, with inclusive participation, as stressed in Security Council Resolution 2624, demanding the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in the peace process. In this regard, the reckless provocations and dangerous escalation in the Red Sea must stop, as those activities do not help at all to ensure the aspirations of Yemeni people to realize sustainable peace and development. As the chair of the Security Council Sanctions Committee on Yemen, established pursuant to Resolution 2140, the Republic of Korea will carefully watch the situation on the ground, unfolding in and around Yemen, especially the implementation of the sanctions, including the arms embargo. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant de la République de Corée de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant du Royaume-Uni.
Thank you, President. Let me start by congratulating France on assuming the presidency for the month of January. You can count on our full support. I also welcome the 5 new elected members to the Council and look forward to working closely with them. I join the Secretary-General in expressing condolences following the attack on a memorial ceremony in Iran that reportedly killed more than 100 civilians. And I thank ASG Chiari and IMO Secretary-General Dominguez for briefing us today. President, the United Kingdom condemns in the strongest terms the illegal and unjustified attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea by Houthi militants. We call on the Houthis to cease these attacks immediately. Today, we joined 11 countries in a statement warning against further attacks. We will continue to work with allies and partners to pursue all diplomatic routes to end this threat. If necessary, as the UK Defence Secretary has said, we will not hesitate to take action to deter threats to freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. Attacks using unmanned aerial vehicles, missiles and small boats are a direct threat to freedom of navigation protected by international law. They pose a severe economic threat not only to Yemen, where, by driving up food prices, they risk exacerbating the already dire humanitarian situation, but also to global food security and supply lines. Contrary to claims made by the Houthis, these attacks are totally indiscriminate and target shipping that has no connection to Israel. We call for the immediate release of the MV Galaxy Leader and its crew, nationals of Bulgaria, Mexico, the Philippines, Romania, and Ukraine. President, the British Foreign Secretary spoke with the Iranian Foreign Minister on Sunday, making clear our view that Iran shares responsibility for preventing these attacks, given their long-standing support to the Houthis. We call on all parties in the region to exercise restraint and avoid escalation. We are deeply concerned by the impact on civilians who are suffering the most through this crisis and would bear the brunt of further destabilization. It is in all our interests to avoid this. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant du Royaume-Uni de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de l'Algérie.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is our inaugural address as an elected member of the Security Council, and I wish to emphasize Algeria's firm commitment to actively contribute to the Council mission of maintaining international peace and security. Allow me first to extend heartfelt congratulations to France for assuming the presidency of the Security Council for the month of January. And rest assured of Algeria full support during this crucial period. Additionally, we express our gratitude to Ecuador for its commendable leadership in conducting the Council activities throughout the month of December. I would like also to extend my sincere appreciation to Mr. Khaled Khiari and Mr. Arsenio Dominguez for their insightful briefing, which have provided valuable perspective on recent development in the region and their consideration. Mr. President, this development carry indeed significant implication for maritime and economic security in the region and beyond. We recognize the Red Sea as a critical route for global trade, responsible for around 15% of the world maritime traffic. And safe maritime navigation in the Red Sea is of paramount importance for the whole world. Therefore, our opinion is that the recent development in the Red Sea should be analyzed within a broader regional context. First, the region is currently navigating through a challenging period of instability with a potential of regional spillover at any moment. Thus, it is of paramount importance to exercise restraint and abstain for escalating tension to prevent the emergence of any regional conflicts with out-of-control consequences. Second, positive signals have been consistently emerging from Yemen through the dedicated effort of the Special Envoy, garnering support from local parties and regional actors. It is imperative to steer clear of any actions that may lead to repercussion, or these could escalate tension in Yemen itself and compromise the tireless effort of the Special Envoy. Third, the primary responsibility for maritime security rests with the coastal states, as they are best positioned to ensure the safety of these crucial waterways. In this regard, we recall the establishment of the Council of Arab and African states bordering the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden as a framework of serving security and economic interest in these strategic waterways. Consequently, any collective effort lacking the active involvement of the concerned coastal state is likely to fall short of achieving the desired results. Lastly, comprehensive analysis of effective management of any situation necessitate an understanding within its historical and geographical context. Therefore, addressing the root cause that impede maritime security become imperative for ensuring a prompt, efficient, and effective response. To conclude, Mr. President, the current international and regional instability is a manifestation of yet another profound malaise. It is the malaise of the multilateralism, the erosion of the collective security architecture, and the weakening of diplomacy. Effort to fragment a crisis or conflict are bound to fail. The Red Sea is more than just a trade route. It is a region steeped in civilization, representing community with legitimate aspiration, legitimate hopes. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de l'Algérie de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de la Suisse.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. S'agissant de la première réunion formelle de l'année, je vous assure du plein soutien de la Suisse pour votre présidence. Je tiens également à féliciter l'Équateur pour sa présidence réussie du mois dernier. Nous présentons tous nos vœux de succès aux 5 membres élus qui débutent leur mandat et nous nous réjouissons de travailler avec eux. Je remercie le sous-secrétaire général Mohamed Khaled Riari et le secrétaire général de l'OMI, Arsenio Dominguez, pour leurs exposés. La Suisse demeure préoccupée concernant la sécurité maritime en mer Rouge en raison des attaques continues des outils contre des navires de marchandises et par le risque d'une escalade de la situation. À cet égard, nous saluons les efforts notamment des Nations Unies visant une désescalade et encourageons leur poursuite. Nous faisons écho au communiqué de presse de ce Conseil du 1er décembre qui a condamné l'attaque contre le navire de commerce Galaxy Leader. Nous réitérons notre demande de libération immédiate et sans condition de l'ensemble de son équipage. Dans ce contexte, nous soulignons l'importance des droits et libertés de navigation de tous les navires dans le golfe d'Aden et en mer Rouge, conformément au droit international. La situation en mer Rouge a déjà des répercussions sur le trafic maritime mondial. Il est essentiel de prévenir une escalade régionale qui aurait davantage de conséquences néfastes pour le trafic maritime international et pourrait également porter préjudice aux négociations en cours entre les parties au conflit au Yémen. À ce sujet, l'annonce de l'envoyé spécial du secrétaire général des Nations Unies pour le Yémen, Hans Grundberg, selon laquelle les parties auraient convenu d'un ensemble de mesures pour mettre en œuvre un cessez-le-feu national, est encourageante. Il est important de s'assurer que les conditions pour la mise en œuvre effective de ces mesures soient réunies. L'unité de ce Conseil dans l'accomplissement de son mandat conformément au droit international, ainsi que l'appel à la prudence et la retenue de tous les acteurs, demeure crucial pour éviter une escalade majeure dans la région et pour assurer la sécurité maritime. Je vous remercie.
Je remercie le représentant de la Suisse de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant du Mozambique.
Thank you. Mr. President, allow me to begin by congratulating France for assuming the presidency of the Security Council for the month of January. I also wish to thank the outgoing President, Ecuador, for the exemplary leadership and wisdom in steering the Security Council during the month of December. Likewise, we join our counterparts in welcoming the newly elected members of the Security Council, namely Algeria, Guyana, Republic of Korea, Sierra Leone, and Slovenia. I also extend our gratitude to Mr. Khaled Kiari, Assistant Secretary General, and Mr. Arsenio Dominguez, IMO Secretary General, for their comprehensive briefings. Mr. President, before I go further, allow me also to express Mozambique's deepest condolences to Japan for the earthquake that occurred in that country recently and claimed more than 60 human lives. Mr. President, Mozambique observes with great concern the escalating tensions in the Red Sea, marked by an increasing number of attacks against commercial vessels and the involvement of various actors in the region. These attacks pose a serious threat to maritime security and the international commerce and overall stability in the region, and rightly so, the collective concern from the international community. Recognizing the crucial role of the shipping industry in global trade and consequently in our normal way of life, and decline commercial shipping in the Red Sea will inevitably have adverse effects on both regional and worldwide trade. Maritime security is indispensable for effective trade flows. It is therefore paramount that we safeguard and uphold international navigation, including navigation rights and vessel freedom, in accordance with the international maritime law. Mr. President, Yemen continues to grapple with an extended conflict. Any progress achieved so far toward a comprehensive ceasefire agreement in Yemen should not be overshadowed by the escalating violence in the Red Sea. The Yemeni peace process and any positive outcomes from ongoing peace negotiations between the Houthis and Saudis should be our main priority. The urgency of avoiding any catastrophic consequences from this escalation cannot be overstated. We call for an immediate cessation of the attacks on the vessels and their crews. We also appeal all involved, including regional actors, to exercise maximum restraint. As custodians of international peace and security, it is our collective responsibility to ensure that the ongoing peace efforts in Yemen are not jeopardized by these attacks. The unity of the Security Council and its alignment with the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter are fundamental in this regard. Mr. President, to conclude, Mozambique actively supports a peaceful resolution to the Red Sea conflict, emphasizing the adherence to international law and international maritime law in particular. Ensuring open communication between the involved parties should be a priority toward preserving peace and stability in the Red Sea and the broader region. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant du Mozambique de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de la Fédération de Russie.
Господин председатель, во-первых, позвольте выразить наши поздравления вам с вступлением в должность председателя Совета в январе и выразить надежду на то, что вы проведете его успешно. Во-вторых, хотели бы поблагодарить посла Хосе де ля Гаску и его команду Эквадора за прекрасно проведенное председательство в декабре. В декабре у нас было немало сложных сюжетов и решений, которые пришлось принять Совету и через которые пришлось пройти. И мы полагаем, что эквадорское председательство блестяще справилось со своей ролью. Хотим также поприветствовать новых членов Совета, Гаяну, Республику Корея, Сьерра-Леоне, Словению и Алжир. Господин председатель, мы признательны помощнику генерального секретаря Халиду Хьяри и генеральному секретарю ему Арсению Домингесу за их брифинги. Положение дел в акватории Красного моря вызывает у нас серьезные опасения. Проходящие через него торговые пути являются жизненно важной артерией для международной торговли и играют ключевую роль в поддержании стабильности и процветания мировой экономики. Свободное и безопасное судоходство в этом регионе – залог устойчивых поставок не только коммерческих, но и гуманитарных грузов, что критически важно для оказания помощи ряду находящихся в сложных социально-экономических условиях стран, включая сам Йемен. Категорически осуждаем атаки на гражданские суда, ставящие под угрозу не только свободу и безопасность судоходства, но и жизни и здоровье моряков. Кроме того, они создают дополнительные риски и повышают уровень нестабильности в и так уже пылающем регионе. В этой связи Россия поддержала принятое 1 декабря прошлого года заявление Совета Безопасности для прессы по данной теме. Призываем руководство движения Ансар Аллах прекратить любые действия, которые могут создавать угрозу для коммерческих судов и их экипажей в Красном море и Аденском заливе, проявлять сдержанность и демонстрировать ответственное поведение. Движению следует с уважением относиться к принципам безопасности судоходства. Требуем немедленного освобождения судна Galaxy Leader и его экипажа. Господин председатель, вместе с тем, сюжет, ради обсуждения которого мы здесь сегодня собрались, невозможно рассматривать в отрыве от региональной динамики. Американский представитель призывал нас сегодня зреть в корень проблем. Ну что ж, давайте так и сделаем. Проблема с обеспечением свободы судоходства в Красном море и Аденском заливе развивается столь тревожным образом не в вакууме. Думаю, вряд ли кто-то из наших коллег будет отрицать тот факт, что происходящее в Красном море – прямая проекция насилия в Газе, где вот уже 3 месяца продолжается жестокая операция Израиля. Эскалация наблюдается и на других оккупированных палестинских территориях, а также на границе Израиля и Ливана. Не секрет, что в ближневосточном регионе крайне разочарованы тем, что все это время покрывающие действия Израиля США держат в заложниках остальных членов Совета Безопасности и не дают принять резолюции с требованием немедленного прекращения огня, раз за разом используя для этого право вето. Вашингтон подрывает все усилия по оказанию гуманитарной помощи палестинцам, и оба продукта Совета Безопасности, принятые за это время, резолюции 2712 и 2720, по сути, остаются нереализованными. Это вызывает гнев в арабском мире, приобретающий порой столь опасные формы, как действия Ансар Аллах в Красном море. Контролировать эмоции населения правительством ближневосточных государств становится все сложнее. В ситуации же, когда в дело вступает не государственный игрок, это практически невозможно. Господин председатель, мы видим 2 сценария развития ситуации в Красном море. Первый – благоприятный. Удвоение усилий Совета для урегулирования многолетнего конфликта в Йемене и прекращения насилия в секторе Газа. Тогда будут устранены причины нынешнего обострения, и безопасное судоходство в регионе возобновится. Второй – катастрофический. Тушение огня кризиса в Красном море бензином, в духе того, к чему призывают нас Соединенные Штаты и их союзники, у которых в арсенале, как мы все неоднократно имели возможность убедиться, исключительно силовые методы решения. При втором сценарии не только рискует пойти под откос йеменское урегулирование как таковое, но и возникают вполне реальные предпосылки для разгорания нового крупного регионального конфликта вокруг, как минимум, Аравийского полуострова. Об опасности перерастания палестино-израильского конфликта в региональный говорилось неоднократно. И события в Красном море уже не первая ласточка. К сожалению, события идут по второму сценарию. Сколоченным Вашингтоном, так называемая международная морская коалиция, насколько мы можем судить, несмотря на громкое название, на самом деле по большей части состоит из военных кораблей самих Соединенных Штатов, и легитимность ее действий с точки зрения международного права вызывает самые серьезные сомнения. Поэтому наша задача сегодня не только подтвердить согласованный 1 декабря коллективный сигнал Ансар Аллах о недопустимости их действий, но и остудить горячие головы в Вашингтоне, для которых очередной конфликт на Ближнем Востоке всего лишь часть своей собственной геополитической игры. Благодарю вас.
Je remercie le représentant de la Fédération de Russie de cette déclaration et je donne à présent la parole à la représentante du Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President, and please permit me to extend my delegation's congratulations and best wishes to you on France's assumption to the presidency of the Security Council for the month of January, and also to congratulate Ambassador José de la Gasca and the Ecuadorian team for their excellent presidency in January. I also want to thank you and everyone that have welcomed us into this council, and we look forward to working very closely with you. I also thank ASG Chiari and Secretary General Dominguez for the updates and for sharing their assessment of the situation. Guyana condemns in the strongest terms the recent attacks against commercial vessels in the Red Sea. We are alarmed at the frequency of these attacks, which endanger international navigation and the lives of crew members. It is for this reason that we supported the call for today's open briefing. We are particularly dismayed to note that the attacks have increased since 19th November and join the international community in calling for their immediate end and for the preservation of navigational rights and freedoms of all vessels in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea in accordance with international law. We also demand the immediate release of the Galaxy leader and its crew and reject all violations of international law and attacks on civilians and civilian objects wherever they occur. We recall the Council's press statement of 1st of December condemning the Houthi attacks against commercial vessels and share members' concern about the potential impact of these attacks on the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Mr. President, Guyana urges the perpetrators to cease all attacks and avoid any further action that could spark an escalation in tensions and compound the already volatile situation in the Middle East. A wider regional conflagration in the present circumstances must be avoided at all costs. We also note that the Red Sea, with its connection to the Suez Canal, is one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. The importance of this route to international commerce cannot be overstated, with more than 12% of global trade passing through the Red Sea every day. Consequently, the impact of these attacks can cause severe disruptions to global trade and must be addressed immediately. The longer they are allowed to persist, the greater the eventual cost and disruption to international maritime trade, energy security, and the global economy. In this vein, Mr. President, we urge full compliance with the Djibouti Code of Conduct and Jeddah Agreement. We also underline the need for all involved to act responsibly and not impede ongoing efforts to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East or to secure a comprehensive ceasefire in Yemen and an inclusive intra-Yemeni political agreement under the auspices of the United Nations. I thank you.
Je remercie la représentante du Guyana de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de la Sierra Leone.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mr. President, Sierra Leone congratulates you and the Republic of France on assuming the presidency of the Security Council for the month of January 2024. We extend our best wishes to you and your team. Sierra Leone notes with appreciation the working methods of your presidency for an effective, open, and action-oriented Security Council. We also take this opportunity to recognize the excellent work of Ecuador during their presidency in the month of December 2023. Sierra Leone further congratulates and commends the 5 outgone elected members, namely Albania, Brazil, Gabon, Ghana, and the United Arab Emirates, for their distinguished and valuable contributions to the work of the Council. We thank you, Mr. President, and members of the Security Council for the welcome accorded to my delegation. We are indeed honored to be joining the Council together with Algeria, Guyana, Republic of Korea, and Slovenia. In our maiden statement in this hallowed chamber on 29 January 1970, my delegation expressed great belief in the essential importance of the Security Council, as we paid sincere tribute to its tireless and courageous work towards peace and international security. As we had hoped for a successful decade in the 1970s, that resilience and courage is needed today. We therefore commit to being constructive in ensuring the Council's unity and effectiveness. Mr. President, turning now to our agenda, I thank Assistant Secretary General Mr. Khalid Kiari and Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, Mr. Antonio Dominguez, for their important briefing. The members of the Security Council in the Council's press statement issued on 1st December 2023 condemned in the strongest terms recent Houthi attacks against a commercial vessel in the Red Sea, and demanded that all such attacks and actions ceased immediately. The Council also called for immediate release of the vessel MV Galaxy Leader and its crew. Further, the members of the Security Council underlined the importance of navigational rights and freedoms of all vessels in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, in accordance with international law, and recalled the importance of enhancing international and regional cooperation to counter threats to peace and security in the region. Sierra Leone is therefore seriously concerned that despite the Council's press statement, there has been an escalation of maritime attacks which have adversely affected navigation in the Red Sea, gravely threatening the movement of essential commodities such as food and fuel. We also note the impact on delivery of humanitarian assistance to destinations and people in their need of such assistance in the region and globally. The attacks by the Houthis in the Red Sea has had great consequences on maritime security and navigation of vessels. We note the report by commercial vessels of missiles and drone attacks by the Houthis rebels. This reportedly has led to the disruption of trade routes and forcing shipping firms to take the more costly routes across the Cape of Good Hope. Additionally, the attacks on maritime vessels in the Red Sea risk creating further escalation of the already tense and volatile situation in the Middle East, which in turn will be a serious threat to international peace and security. In this regard, we condemn in the strongest terms the continued attacks against commercial vessels in international waters and demand the immediate release of all abducted crew members of the MV Galaxy Leader. Abducting crew members of shipping vessels operating in international waters is a serious violation of international law, and we demand the utmost respect for applicable international law, including the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. Sierra Leone notes the significant initiative establishing the multinational task force to deter and counter Houthis' attack in the Red Sea. In this significant endeavor, we urge for due compliance with international law. Mr. President, we are more particularly concerned that the increase in maritime attacks in the Red Sea poses a serious risk to the peace talks, which in our view is a process that can lead to a comprehensive ceasefire agreement. In this regard, we call on all concerned to take appropriate steps to ensure that the attacks on vessels in the Red Sea do not lead to a breakdown in the Yemeni peace process. We join other Council members in the efforts to support the ongoing peace talks in Yemen, which we hope will lead to durable peace in the country. Finally, Sierra Leone is deeply concerned about the related regional dimension and possible escalation. We therefore call on regional actors to refrain from provocative acts which will further escalate an already serious and dire situation in the region. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de la Sierra Leone de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de la Chine.
诸位先生，首先我要祝贺法国担任本月安理会轮值主席，中国代表团将给予你和你的同事充分的合作。我也要祝贺厄瓜多尔圆满完成上个月安理会轮值主席的工作。我还要借此机会欢迎阿尔及利亚、圭亚那、韩国、塞阿利昂和斯洛文尼亚加入安理会。相信他们将为安理会更好地履行维护国际和平与安全的职责做出贡献。诸位先生，我感谢加亚利助理秘书长和国际海事组织多明戈斯秘书长的通报。红海水域是重要的货物和能源运输通道，确保该水域畅通，确保过往船只的安全，不仅有助于维护地区和平与稳定，也有助于维护全球供应链安全和国际贸易秩序，符合国际社会的共同利益。中方对一段时间以来在红海水域多次发生袭击和扣押商船事件表示关切，呼吁有关方面停止袭扰民用船只的行为，尊重并保障各国 在红海水域的航行自由。我们认为，各方，特别是有影响力的大国，都应为维护红海水域航道安全发挥建设性和负责任的作用。当前，也门问题正处于关键节点，红海局势的紧张为推进也门政治进程带来了新的挑战，给本已动荡不安的中东地区增添了新的复杂因素。我们呼吁有关各方保持冷静克制，坚持对话协商，推进政治解决，避免采取任何加剧局势紧张的行为，尽最大努力维护也门政治进程的积极态势。主席先生，当前红海的紧张局势是加沙冲突外溢影响的表现之一。尽早在加沙实现停火止战，缓解当地的人道危机，有助于防止红海局势进一步升级，防止中东其他地区也被拖入冲突与战乱之中。中方愿同各方一道，继续为推动红海紧张局势降温、也门问题政治解决、加沙实现停火止战、中东地区长治久安做出不懈的努力。谢谢主席。
Je remercie le représentant de la Chine de sa déclaration. Je vais maintenant faire une déclaration en ma qualité de représentant de la France. Je remercie messieurs Chiari et Dominguez pour leur présentation. La France condamne les attaques menées par les Houthis en mer Rouge contre des navires commerciaux. Celles-ci portent atteinte à des principes fondamentaux du droit international, la liberté de circulation dans les mers ouvertes. Par ces actions armées, les Houthis portent la responsabilité extrêmement lourde de l'escalade des tensions dans la région, ainsi que pour la stabilité internationale. C'est 15% du commerce mondial qui est ainsi menacé directement par les Houthis et ceux qui les forment et les entretiennent. Nous continuons d'appeler à la libération immédiate du Galaxy Leader et de son équipage, illégalement détenu par les Houthis. Pour sa part, la France rappelle que les États ont le droit de prendre des mesures appropriées pour assurer la sûreté en mer. C'est ce que nous avons fait lorsque la frégate Languedoc a détruit le 9 décembre des drones qui menaçaient un navire français. Il est aussi de la responsabilité collective de ce Conseil de s'assurer que le processus de paix au Yémen se poursuive selon la feuille de route de l'envoyé spécial auquel la France apporte son plein soutien. Nous appelons toutes les parties yéménites à poursuivre les négociations sous son égide. La France continuera à prendre ses responsabilités dans le détroit de Bab al-Mandeb et continuera à contribuer à la sécurité des navires commerciaux en lien avec ses partenaires. Elle appelle l'ensemble des acteurs internationaux et régionaux à faire preuve de responsabilité pour éviter toute nouvelle escalade dans la région et elle demande que ce Conseil se montre uni face à une menace qui nous concerne tous. Je reprends mes fonctions de président du Conseil et je donne à présent la parole au représentant d'Israël.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I wish to congratulate the new members of the Council for beginning their terms. Mr. President, the Houthis' attacks on maritime trade are not merely an escalation, nor are they a spillover. It did not happen magically by itself. This reality is a glimpse into the dark future of the region and the entire globe if action is not taken. This is just the beginning of a chaotic Middle East that will drag the rest of the world into chaos. Distinguished Council members, as we speak, the Middle East is on fire. For years, all moderate countries in the region have faced the growing threat of radical terrorists. Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad have been attempting to tighten a noose of terror around Israel's borders. Shiite terror groups in Iraq have been firing drones and rockets at U.S. military bases and have also attacked the United Arab Emirates. The Houthis have carried out numerous missiles and drone attacks on critical Saudi Arabian and Emirati infrastructure, including on Aramco oil facilities, as well as the Abu Dhabi International Airport. 3 months ago, 4 Bahraini servicemen were killed in a Houthis attack. And now the Houthis have declared war on both Israel and the United States and proceeded to attack ships in the Red Sea, threatening freedom of navigation, maritime security, and international commerce. These terrorists could not care less about international law. They could not care less about this council. They don't even recognize your existence. Colleagues, this is definitely not an Israel problem. This is not even a Middle East problem. This is a global problem. 12% of global commerce passes through the Suez Canal. Nearly 10% of the global oil demand traverses this passage as well. The Houthis' threat in the Red Sea is now forcing ships to go around the Horn of Africa, turning a 16-hour transit into a 24-day journey. And if you want to talk numbers, the complete closure of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait will cost the global economy over $6 billion per day. I hope we can all fully comprehend the absurdity of this situation. The Houthi terrorists, which are armed and funded by a UN member state, are flagrantly attacking ships flying any flag. These are British ships, a Japanese ship, a Singaporean ship, ships flying Bahamian flags, and ships flying Panamanian flags. These are blatant terror attacks against diverse global targets. This is the epitome of an international terror threat. Council members, today must be far more than a wake-up call. Today, we must act. This Council has already acknowledged the Houthis as a terror group. Now is the time to enforce sanctions against them and all those who arm and fund them. It's time for this Council to address the radioactive Shiite elephant in the room. The Ayatollah regime is the one thing that ties together all the elements of destruction in the Middle East. It funds, arms, trains, and directs the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah in Lebanon, other terror groups in Syria and Iraq, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Iran has spent decades spreading cancerous jihadism across the region. Iran seeks to dominate the Middle East and beyond under their Shiite hegemony, and their weapons are armies of terror proxies, causing death and destructing in every country they touch. The Ayatollah's strategy is to stand in the shadow while pulling the strings of their terror proxy puppets. Hamas massacre would not have been possible without Iranian funding, weapons, and training. Hezbollah, with its terror army and 150,000 rockets, would not exist if it were not for their Iranian overlords. Ukrainian civilians would not be murdered with suicide drones without this Iranian-supplied weaponry. The Houthis, terrorists from one of the world's poorest countries, would definitely not have ballistic missiles and explosive drones without the supply of Iranian arms, and they would not have the capabilities to locate and target ships without Iranian intelligence supplied in real time. This cannot be ignored by the Council. Just a week ago, Muhammad Reza Naqvi, a general in the Revolutionary Guard, blatantly threatened that the closure of the Mediterranean Sea and the Strait of Gibraltar will be next. Iran is a global danger. The time has come to expose this to the world and take action. This can be the Council's shining moment, the moment it tackles the real threat to the Middle East. The Ayatollah regime is the #1 global sponsor of terror. It is flagrantly violating Security Council resolutions 2231 and 2216. Iran is the architect of regional instability, and it is time to take real action and address the destructive role Iran plays. Mr. President, if we remain idle in the face of the global security threat that is Iran, then the Houthis are just the beginning of a dark future that we will be ushering in, a future in which terror organizations and terror regimes murder, maim, and terrorize with impunity, and this will inspire terrorists around the globe. Let's act now. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant d'Israël de sa déclaration. Il n'y a plus d'oratrices ou d'orateurs inscrits sur la liste. J'invite à présent les membres du Conseil à poursuivre l'examen de la question dans le cadre de consultations. La séance est levée.